Good afternoon, welcome to the UK Column Live. It's the 10th of January 2013 and it's just gone 1 o'clock. Myself and Brian are here as always, and we have Patrick Henningsen joining us in a little while. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. Well, what an incredible week it's been, really, not only for us because it's been our first week back here in the studio in Plymouth, but it's just evident that things are unfolding faster and faster, not only in UK but worldwide. And one of the comments that's been coming in from people who've been contacting us, as they do daily, is that they're just sensing that not only are things badly wrong in Britain and elsewhere, but they're sensing that the whole thing is speeding up. And certainly having a look at the spread of the newspapers today and the sort of things they're talking about, it's obvious something's going on, isn't it?
Something massive's going on, yeah.
I'm just going to have to fiddle with this. I hope we're not going to have technical problems today, but just see what happens with the earpiece. Okay, I think we're all right.
With your first story.
Well, I was going to say, first of all, we should, as always, comment on the weather. It's pretty cold and chilly here in Plymouth, England. This morning started incredibly foggy, certainly in the Devon area. You could hardly see anything if you were out walking. It's a bit like politics in Britain, isn't it? Something's going on, isn't it? And the cartoonist who did this excellent little diagram was trying to pick up on the fact that we're there living somewhere in UK, whether it's England, Wales or Scotland. Ireland doesn't appear, Northern Ireland doesn't appear on this little diagram, I don't think. Oh yes, it does. It's got bent judiciary over the top of it, so I'm not sure that's correct or not. But essentially we're saying that if we take a snapshot of the country at the moment, something is badly wrong. We're seeing fraud, we're seeing corruption in the judiciary, we're seeing the regionalisation of the country, we're seeing state-orchestrated breakup of families, kidnapping of children, political correctness, perverted sexual education, all the things there, which I hope you can read on screen. And what we're really starting to say is, look, this isn't normal. It isn't being just created because people have changed, they've become incompetent. It's obvious that there's a political agenda driving this increasing state of chaos. And what's been put in above the smoky, cloudy layer is that we've actually got a common purpose at work. Now that's not being shown as simply the political charity common purpose. It's saying that we've got people in very high places who are unfolding a political agenda. It's a fifth column, it's subversive, it's using propaganda, and the BBC's obviously got a special label there. But ultimately we know that whatever's being done, whether it's in a British political sense or European Union, it's being funded by the corrupt cabal of international bankers. And what is coming in day by day, ever more obvious to see in Britain, is a dictatorship, which are of course the little stomping feet up in the left-hand corner of the screen. So we're just going to say to you that that cartoon is still, we think, very effective. What's going on in Britain today, the collapse of society, no jobs for our young people, and many others, the state of the economy, the collapse of the financial institution. This is not accidental, it's being driven. Yep. And we're going to take the lid off it. Now, before we get into the mainstream news, we're just going to flag up a story which we've stuck with now for some time, and that is the story, the tragic story of Leanne Smith, who was the mother who murdered her 2 children in Spain rather than allow them to be taken by social services. And we have consistently supported this mother, not for what she has done, but the circumstances around why she did what she did. And Leanne Smith, I expect to come into the news within the next few days, as there's an appeal that's been launched against her sentence in Spain.
It's on the 14th, isn't it?
14th of January, we understand. And of course, her partner, Martin Smith, committed suicide in prison, allegedly. There has still not been a full inquest on Martin Smith's death, but we believe that this will actually be taking place in the summer, in June sometime. The UK column has reported on this case. We have consistently pointed out that the trial of Martin Smith in Manchester was an utter disgrace, where amongst attempts to deny the public access to the court case, we were also aware that evidence relating to DNA evidence, which could have helped Martin's defence, was not addressed at all in court. So there is something about this whole case. Of course, what it comes back to is what is happening in the name of social services. And Leanne Smith never reported in the mainstream press was that she had conducted fantastic work, not only within the education system of Cumbria, but also in her professional work to do with social services. And she had said at a professional meeting she was going to sort the mess out when she was promoted. And what she was talking about, of course, was the abuse of children in the supposed care of social services. And her story then unfolded from that point. None of this has ever been reported in any detail at all by the mainstream media. And indeed, as we have said on previous occasions, when UK Column has spoken to some of the mainstream journalists, they can't run away from the case fast enough, because it's quite clear that they've sold the story on the number of newspapers that can be sold. So we will continue to bite the bullet and report on this case, and we predict that there's going to be some very interesting facts emerging over the coming months. Well,
I found this
I've
picture.
hogged it a bit.
Yeah. What have you have you changed it a bit?
I've put your picture in of grocery bills.
Oh, okay. Yes, my grocery bills picture. I actually found it off of Facebook. Well done to the group Vote of No Confidence in the UK Coalition for creating this picture. But I had a look into the background to confirm their figures, and it has been reported in the Daily Mail. It was in a forum and various other places that, yeah, the MPs get a weekly allowance of £160 a week to buy their food and shopping when there are mums struggling on their job seekers allowance or income support who have to feed their family, and they get £71.
And
So,
what was interesting, wasn't it, the moment we mentioned this in the office, some of the other volunteers here immediately said, hang on a minute, that's nearly as much as my pension.
Yep.
So it's really good to see that people are now starting to focus on the sheer hypocrisy of the people we've got in Parliament. And if we look at the general size and capacity of some MPs, such as Mr Eric Pickles, obviously he's taking full allowance of his grocery money each week.
Yes.
Well, sorry, but it's pretty obvious when you see the
absolutely.
size of him.
Yes.
So let's target the real scroungers, and I think this is a very good theme, because it is becoming ever more obvious that we actually have a pretty disgraceful group of people in Parliament, in power. We're going to be talking about expenses, we're going to be talking about their morality. But if we remember that little cartoon we've started with and we see the chaos around us, it's pretty easy where we should be looking.
I mean, what's more shocking is they're going to be cutting the child benefit, etc., aren't they? So
absolutely.
yeah.
We'll just bring up the Mail here. I know Mike's got a comment waiting in the background, but you saw.
Yeah, this was just obviously in one of the Mail's forums with people exactly asking the question of why the MPs are given that amount of money on grocery shoppings, and there was quite a discussion on it. So if people just want to put in UK MPs' expenses for groceries, they will find all the info online.
Perhaps that would be a very good thing for all of us to be complaining and flagging up with our own MPs.
Definitely.
Yeah, just incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mike?
I was just wondering if Pickles was spending his money on beer. It looks more likely he's spending his money on beer.
Well, I don't know.
Beer and
but
pies.
Good comment, just sheer speculation, you know.
all I know is that we're seeing the government increasingly target people they consider to be overweight, and it's very interesting to see one of the people telling us how to live our lives is an extremely plump gentleman. Yeah, I should probably be receiving emails about that comment. This is another article that, maybe people would read and just let go, but we just thought we'd flag it up. Car clamping gang boss ordered to pay $3 million or face 10 years in prison. And for me, the interesting thing over this story was the fact that here we have somebody, yes, they've been fraudulent, but my goodness, look at the sentence, 10 years in prison. But we've got politicians who over the last few years are consistently committing criminal acts with public money to do with their allowances or rent. And what is actually happening to those politicians? Absolutely nothing. They're clearly protected. And so we can see that in line with a forming dictatorship, we've got a two-tier state. We've got the elite who are actually above the law, and then we've got ordinary people who are perhaps not even able to feed themselves, and they are going to get the full force of the law. And of course, this sheer hypocrisy in how people are treated is part of an elitist dictatorship, which is coming in quite quickly. And if we stick on the two-tier system, this is another article from the Mail talking about a council temp who's earning £779 a day. They're pointing out that's more than David Cameron and his own chief executive, or the guy in the council. And the article really goes on to say that this is not an isolated case, because other councils in UK are using temps on the basis they're saying they can't actually get in the right quality staff. We then say to ourselves, well, why do they need to pay people these vast salaries? My answer, and I think other people would agree with this, is the fact that if you pay people something around £10,000 a month, let's put it in a monthly bracket, we're basically saying that they can be controlled. They're not going to do anything wrong. They're not going to lose their job. They're just going to do absolutely as they're told. Does it get reported? Well, this is going back a bit. I think this is about 18 months or so old, but at a stage where Plymouth City Council Chief Executive Officer was awarding himself an £18,000 a year pay rise. So the 18%, £38,000 a year pay rise. We were seeing cuts and the start of talk about cuts in public services. But the thing is here, how did the local paper react at this time? And it was very obvious from the Plymouth Herald, this is a picture of their billboard, that they were more interested in offering people free bacon sandwiches, sarnies, baps, depending on which part of the country you come from. Why would a local paper be so remiss at reporting? And then, of course, we start to investigate the relationship between local papers and local authorities. And we are seeing more and more across the country that there's a very cosy relationship, not just with a local paper, because most of the local papers have now been taken over by the larger media organisations. But effectively, we're seeing them work to a common purpose. So the big pay rises come in, the massive cuts, people are sacked, but the true information isn't reported in the mainstream press. So we're going to watch this, but our prediction is until the politicians are properly dealt with, we're going to see more of this two-tier elitist society. Building on green sites. Now, this is something which is starting to affect people across the country. We've got Minister Nick Bowles here saying that the government has a moral duty to make councils find land. And he's saying that councils have until March to come up with land for 270,000 homes for each of the next 5 years. Now, of course, what is interesting about this is that we are being given these statistics about the number of homes that need building. We're not concerned about the amount of land in agricultural use. We're not dealing with the number of people coming into the country on an annual basis. There's talk about immigration, but there's no common sense policy. And here we are saying, well, the only thing we're going to do is build and build and build. Where are the jobs coming from?
Yeah.
And there was silence in the studio because we don't know,
No.
because there's something wrong here, isn't there? Now,
we didn't quite get to this yesterday.
we didn't, so we decided
Mentioning
we'd
no
bring
names.
it up. Essentially, we had a little series of slides which we thought were important for taking a look at who the mainstream parties really are, what they're about. And we decided that it would be good if we take a fairly regular look at the Conservatives and Labour and Lib Dem websites to see what sort of thing they're talking about. I think one of the things you did say is that it's quite noticeable that everything has gone into big, bold writing and glossy colours. It's all a bit childish in the way it's presented.
We got to remember the video that we've shown in the past of a certain person speaking at the TED conference discussing exactly that these new websites pushing this new agenda, the use of the internet to push the new political agenda. If you see websites with particular big, bold, childish almost presentation, that's indicative of the type of website which is pushing the with a small c and a small p, the common purpose.
This is the business of pushing government through the internet now and pushing agendas through the internet. The government wants to take control right the way through the internet spectrum. So it's going to be into internets, it's going to be into tweeting and twittering. And this is how the parallel system of government is being put together. Mike's referring to a gentleman who was speaking on stage in London, a member of the public sector, a former member of the public sector, who's now working in London and Washington and with the defence industry. And he was describing how the present system of government needs to get more disruptors. Those are his words, not my words. More disruptors, not only into government, but into organisations in order to push through the change agenda. And of course, what he was referring to is absolutely getting in amongst these websites. So here's the Tory party, which has clearly got no money for ordinary people. But of course, what it claims as a complete lie is that they're helping to return fairness to welfare. And I know Mike did quickly show the statistics. We're not going to dwell on these today, but we're simply going to say it's very interesting to get onto this Conservative website and just look at the sheer hypocrisy of what they're talking about and the sheer propaganda that's now being pushed forward to make us believe that everything is under control, whereas our cartoon has clearly shown that it's not under control.
No.
And of course, this isn't just across the Tories. If we go to Labour, here we've got Ed Balls up on part of their website. Labour will today challenge the government to back its plan for a compulsory jobs guarantee for the long-term unemployed, as new figures from the IFS show 7 million working people will hit by the government. So here's Labour wrecked the country without any trouble while they were in power, and of course Gordon Brown sold off the gold reserves for peanuts. And yet we've got tit for tat policy here. No, it's the Conservatives' fault. But interestingly, we've got Ed Balls here. We're going to mention him a bit later because, of course, Ed Balls is a total international globalist and Bilderberg member. And so his agenda is nothing to do with the well-being of British people. It's to do with creating a one-world government. And we've got Douglas Alexander here. Senior business leaders have got concerns that the Prime Minister risks getting it badly wrong on Europe. So here's this Labour MP, shadow Foreign Secretary. What's interesting is if we dig into his background a bit, you can check all this yourself because it's up on his personal website. He is an absolute political man. He's gone through university, he's been trained, he's been involved with the Labour Party. He's briefly worked as a lawyer in Scotland, but then he gets himself elected and he's back into the Labour machinery. So this man has got absolutely no knowledge or experience of working out on the ground. He's simply been brought up through the Labour system.
Yeah.
And what I'm basically saying is it any wonder that we got the problems we have when the people making the decisions just have no street cred?
Yeah, or clue.
Or clue. And we can probably ram it home with this man, because here's another shot from his own website. And who are the friends he keeps? Well, Bill Clinton, I mean,
No need to.
I don't really need to say
No.
anything too much. I don't know who the black gentleman is. And then, of course, on the left, we've got, and with that, the name goes straight out of my...
Sorry, Bob Geldof.
Bob Geldof, absolutely. Mike?
Well, it was interesting that in 1988, before he went on to do his degree, he was actually working as an intern with the Dukakis presidential campaign and with the Democratic senator on Capitol Hill. And I was just wondering if you're there still. I was just it did occur to me that we know what happens with interns in the States.
Well, in my book, they get trained into the globalist political agenda, so they are completely interchangeable between London and Washington.
Yeah, but I was thinking particularly of Bill Clinton's interns.
Well, absolutely. Special treatment, I think it's called. Okay, and so here we've got Mr. Alexander, and of course, who was the big guru at the time Mr. Alexander was coming into power, was Gordon Brown.
The unelected Prime Minister.
The unelected Prime Minister, and we've described him here as unstable, unreliable, untrustworthy. He sells off Britain's gold reserves, which has cost the nation billions of pounds. Clearly untrustworthy, unreliable, unstable. So where do we now find him? Well, he's now been made the UN's man on education. But this article actually from the Telegraph, I haven't actually got a date on it, but what it was pointing out was that there was a press conference in the UN where Mr. Brown was going to speak, and only one journalist turned up. So certainly within the UN, the press and media have got Mr. Brown sorted out, but of course he did unbelievable damage. And we can't leave out the Lib Dems. So here's part of the Lib Dem website. It's got the nice, cosy, cuddly picture of Nick Clegg. I think that's his wife with him, and they're having a jolly discussion with lots of young people. And of course, the Lib Dems are cutting our taxes. But we feel a little bit cynical on this here in the UK column, because of course it's Nick Clegg who is going flat out to push more millions, billions of UK money into the European Union, a corrupt organisation which has yet to produce a set of audited and approved accounts in 17 years. So Mr. Clegg, the normal hypocrisy, and of course it gets better with the Lib Dems because they've been working on their manifesto for 2015. And if we have a look on their website, the man they've put in charge of that is none other than David Laws. So here he is being commented on in The Guardian because he's warning of more cuts on the way. That's because they're giving all our money to a corrupt European Union. So David Laws is put in charge of Lib Dem policy. What sort of man is he? Well, of course, he was fiddling £50,000 of public money. He hasn't been threatened with prison, of course, but even his own father was prepared to say that he was absolutely appalled at what was going on.
Wow.
So my question is, using Mr. David Laws as the leader of the Lib Dem manifesto, is more and more efficient fiddling going to be top of the Lib Dem agenda? It's funny on one hand, but it's pretty serious on the other one.
Yeah.
So, explosives and batteries. You picked up this amazing story.
Oh, it's
Louise.
amazing. I was driving in this morning, and it was on the radio, and I was actually shouting at the radio, thinking, "What about Cameron?" This gentleman has is going to jail for 33 months over in America for purchasing batteries which, according to the US government, are used to make HARC missiles, and he's being accused of buying them to send over to aid the Iranian people. My argument is this gentleman has gone, this gentleman's done this, he's going to prison, but only recently we've had Cameron, which I believe you're going to show the articles in a moment, off selling BAE Systems and other arms manufacturers over to Kuwait, I believe it was, to sell arms over there to them.
Well, we've got some pictures of that.
How come this guy's going to jail, branded it for buying batteries, and Mr. Cameron can be abroad? But I think Mike's got to jump in. Are you going to jump in with this?
Well, I mean, I watched this when it was originally discussed in the media, because basically, he was trading these batteries, which have many applications other than for arms. The US, however, have an embargo, which, from my understanding, he committed no offence in Britain, but he was just sent over, he was just extradited because the US decided that they wanted him. In the end, what's happened is that he's accepted a plea bargain, I guess because he's been told that he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison unless he did. But he was protesting his innocence vehemently up until this point. So yesterday he accepted a plea bargain and is going to spend some time. He gets a criminal record and will undoubtedly spend some time in prison, but hopefully won't die there. But unbelievable situation. He's had no protection from the British government whatsoever. Just sent over without so much as there was no proper due process as far as I could see in this country, or no requirement to provide any evidence that he had actually committed an offence.
Well, of course, we're seeing more and more of this, aren't we? That people can be pulled out of the UK for supposedly investigation and trial overseas. And we were commenting yesterday or the day before about the European Union wanting to hold data on all the British drivers. And of course, under the European rules at the moment, any one of us could be lifted from UK and taken to another European country on accusations and charges that have been made in those countries.
Yeah, as I said, rendition.
Well, on that subject, I thought it was appropriate that we just remind ourselves of not where this could end, but where this does end. So we've got this picture of Guantanamo Bay, people who were put in this appalling camp and were tortured. There's no ifs or buts. And of course, the Miliband brothers were Ed Miliband were certainly aware of what was going on at the time, and it's not a question that the British government has made a mistake or something. It's obvious that the British government is actively participating in this extradition of people overseas.
I mean, Mr. Tappin, it seems, was so fearful when he got extradited over there, he actually requested to go into solitary confinement. So that's how worried he was about being exported at the age of 54, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where does this lead? Well, perhaps we'll just say at this point, we're obviously very shortly going to be talking to Patrick Henningsen about what's going on in the Middle East, but we've got violence and wars and trouble happening across the world, but also within our own societies we are seeing this creeping dictatorship unfold, and of course it's not just happening in Britain, it's also happening in America. So the link through this Guantanamo Bay picture I think is going to lead us in quite nicely to a few other items that we've got for you today. But Louise, absolutely right, of course. Channel 4 and other papers have picked up on the sheer hypocrisy of David Cameron, and this was a report where they were
over in Kuwait with BAE Systems, Sales UK and Quinetic, with the region in turmoil due to anti-government revolts in Tunisia. This is back in 2011. but he came under fire, Cameron did, by the Scottish National Party, saying it was a disgrace that Prime Minister has embarked on a tour promoting arms sales. And according to The Guardian, Britain has exported the following material to the following countries: Bahrain, rifles, tear gas and ammunition; Egypt, bombs, missiles, body armour; Kuwait, riot shields, patrol boats, military software; Libya, ammunition, crowd control equipment, tear gas; Tunisia, gun parts, radar equipment. And apparently the Department for Business, Innovation and Skills confirmed that licences for these items had been granted, but could not say if they had been exported. British companies are currently exhibiting at they were exhibiting at an arms fair in the Middle East, and our Defence Minister, Mr Howarth, was also there.
Yeah, and it's not isolated, because we've got another article here talking about what did Cameron do the moment the so-called spring was over in Egypt, but he was there with a group of arms dealers again. So the pattern is that if there's trouble, if there's an unstable area of the world, Mr Cameron can get in with arms dealers, but he has trouble actually sorting out general basic needs of food and jobs in UK.
Yeah.
So we've moved into the area of the Middle East, which is probably a good time to see whether we can bring Patrick Henningsen online. Patrick is on the scene in Lebanon as we speak. And have we got you there, Patrick?
Hi, Brian. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can, actually. It's an exceptionally good line today, so that's excellent.
Hi, Patrick.
Hello there. Hi, Lou.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, well, you've been able to hear the general theme of what we've been talking about, but the floor's yours, really. So if you want to comment on Mr Cameron and his arms dealing, or you'd like to lead us into a bit about what's happening in the Middle East, take it away.
Sure. Yeah, David Cameron was actually in the United Arab Emirates only a couple of weeks ago, made a dash through Dubai and some of the other city-states. But basically, what this is, and I outlined this last year back in December 2011, and there's been a rush for arms, and that's a direct result of the hyping up of a war with Iran, and a lot of the available cash that the Gulf states have in order to procure some of these latest technological wonders out of our military-industrial complex has been a spike in oil prices from late 2011 into early 2012. So there's the cash, and of course the salesman from BAE Systems. Their top sales rep is now David Cameron, and he's gone over to make the trip to offer Typhoon jets. They've purchased quite a few of those, and it's all great business if you're in the arms industry. It's absolutely wonderful. However, if you're not in that particular industry, it's not great business for Britain. But there is a little bit of a rush there, and there is competition between U.S. companies and some British companies and French companies in order to secure these contracts. But yes, you can see the cycle. What I'm trying to illustrate, Brian and Louise and Mike, is that there's a cycle, which is to hype up tension in the region, and in some cases create real tension, and that raises the price of petroleum, and in turn cycles back that money into the hands of the arms manufacturers. So as you can see, this is how the economics works. That's why I predicted back in Christmas of last year, 2011, that there would not be an attack on Iran in 2012, because the record profits in the petroleum and in the arms industry were being raked in by the minute, and there was no way, there's too much money being made to actually start an actual war. So, and that I was in direct contravention to every other alternative media pundit and talk show host and whatnot, who were all saying there's going to be an attack within weeks. And I said very calmly that there would not be an attack, and this is why. And 2012 has cycled through, and I was right. So that's basic common sense. It's a basic economic equation. But anyway, aside from the Emirates, I'm in Lebanon right now, in Beirut, and I'm just a few hundred meters actually away from the site where a bomb ripped through the internal security services here in Beirut. That was on October 19th. And a lot of people were worried when that bomb went off and took the lives of 7 people that it might be a return to the destabilization that had plagued Lebanon so horribly back in the 1980s, 70s, 80s, and part of the 90s. So luckily, it looked like an isolated incident. There's a lot of political score settling in a country like Lebanon. This is sectarianism to the extreme. Okay, you know, you might have sectarianism in Britain, which is basically based on class and some ethnic sections, but you know, it takes on a whole new meaning here. Between half this country is Christian, and there's different factions of Christianity as well. You have different factions of Islam. You have Hezbollah in the political arena now as well. And you have a lot of families who have been in power for many generations who've lost power and gained power. And the amount of infighting and rivalries are incredible, and for a very scarce amount of resources in this country, which is economically very depressed at the moment. But there is a very quiet calm here, business as usual in the city. But there is an underlying worry. You could feel it straight away that this situation next door in Syria, which is only a few miles away, could easily spill into Lebanon, and Lebanon can once again be used as a football pitch for some Western powers and some of the other players within the Middle East to fight their skirmishes on. So the Lebanese civil war, as it was called, was hardly a civil war if you count the amount of outside intervention from the likes of Israel and the United States. And of course, you have Syria using this as their battleground as well.
Patrick,
yeah.
Sorry, Patrick, if I may, that you've given us a really nice introduction there. I've just got a map of the area, which I thought if we brought up on screen for people who are trying to familiarise themselves a bit with the area and where exactly you are. If we can bring that up, we should be able to take a look. This is from a very old BBC report where they were actually giving a damage report on damage done by Israeli bombing since the conflict began on the 12th of July. But I thought it was a useful little map. So we've got, we can see Lebanon as a country, obviously bordering on the Mediterranean there, and then borders into Syria there, which is obviously very, very important. And I can also give you just a shot of the city. Obviously quite densely populated, a lot of high-rise building. I take it that at least some of the damage of the previous fighting there's now been repaired. What does
very little?
Very little, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon to see most of the buildings through downtown that still have large bullet holes or holes from artillery fire that dates back to the 1980s. So, you know, there hasn't been any real money put into this country to rebuild it, unlike, you know, Iraq, where the United States will go in, level the country, destroy everything, and then contracts will be awarded to Halliburton, BT Balfour, Bechtel, and some of these Western contractors to come in and rebuild the country. That never happened in Lebanon. So they're just kind of like pay as you go, build as you go. They're just gradually just doing it bit by bit. It's taken about 3 decades. But it's a phenomenally dynamic city, very cosmopolitan. But, you know, the brief 33-day war with Israel, which was in summer of 2006, which you're referring to, that's still fresh in the mind of many people, and there is, you know, fear, and rightfully so, that they could be once again dragged into a sub-regional conflict as a result of what's going on in neighboring Syria. But, you know, Syria has long played this kind of overshadowing role over the destiny and the stability of this small country like Lebanon, which is the size of Wales, but very pivotal in terms of Middle Eastern geopolitics, and also in terms of the global, the largest global picture, because obviously Israel is right to the south of Lebanon. I can drive there right now in less than 2 hours or something like that. So it's a very small pocket, but throughout history, all the way back to the Phoenician times and to Carthage, the Carthaginian Empire, Lebanon has always played a pivotal role in the geopolitics of the region.
Right, I've just got another couple of images which I think we'll bring up. One is of previous damage in the city, just to show people the sort of scale of what was done inside Lebanon. So as you can see on screen, that's well, for the average person in Britain, apart from those that were alive in the Second World War, we can't actually imagine what this is like, or what it's like to live in a urban area with this sort of level of violence going on. And of course, the people that get forgotten are the people at the bottom of the pile who have to exist on the debris. This picture, I think, captures it quite well. So, what's the actual view from people inside Lebanon about what is happening in Syria? They have a
It's a incredible. This is the tough part, Brian, because it's incredibly, everything that happens politically, the discourse in this country is so complex, and that is down to the sort of sectarian aspect. Again, this city is subdivided so much down to so many levels, not just by religion, but by kind of political affiliations and splits within parties and splits upon splits. So there is a large body of people that have the sour taste in their mouth, to put it lightly, with regards to Syria's involvement in the 1980 Civil War conflict here, because Syria switched sides twice within that conflict, and also you have the Palestinian refugee element. Right now, there are a lot of Syrian refugees right now in Beirut as a result of the destabilization project, which is going on just over the border there. So that's also a problem. Syria also has agents embedded in Lebanon for many years, probably for 30 or 40 years. So there's some of them are still active. There's a lot of political score settling that goes way back, and there's still scores being settled as we speak. There's allegations that this bombing on October 17th is a score settling opportunity, using the chaos in order to settle old scores, political scores. So, but obviously it's easy to blame Syria in the past, but now, Syria's got its hands tied, and it's quite obvious from those who've followed the news that's really covering the beginnings of the Syrian conflict, that the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and the Gulf states, I'm talking particularly about Qatar and Saudi Arabia, have been very active in the forming, and Turkey, the forming of the rebel army in that country, and smuggling arms in. Al Jazeera has been involved in giving satellite phones to the Free Syrian Army, and you have a jihadist element coming in from Chechnya, coming in from some from Iraq, some from Saudi Arabia, from Jordan. Jordan is also involved in the arming of the Syrian rebels, arguably, by many reports. So Lebanon is trying to stay out of the, Lebanon doesn't have a direct affiliation with either the United States or Britain. Jordan, as you probably have seen in the news in the last few years, but I know for a fact that there's massive joint military operations going on right now in Jordan with the British Army.
Patrick, just before we go on to Jordan, there's somebody in the UK columns chat room who's asked what your thoughts were about Assad's speech the other day.
It was...
his proposals, not so much his speech, but about his proposals.
Which proposals specifically?
I don't know. They've just asked, what does Patrick think of Assad's proposals and the response to his speech from the Western media?
Well, every time Assad has given a speech, the Western media has just written it off. I think there's a little bit of backpedaling going on because, with regards to Syria, because this incident in Benghazi and I said this on Russia Today a couple of days ago, this Benghazi Gate in America, this is a major game changer for the timetable in Syria, because it's the whole, and I'll outline this in an article I'm working on for Mike and you guys at the column, which is that Plan A was to take out the regime in Syria in the same exact fashion in which they did it in Libya. Okay, that was Plan A. Plan A failed for two reasons. One is because they underestimated the loyalty of the Syrian security forces to the current leadership. That was one, and they also underestimated the sophistication of breaking down this country. Now, Libya is a totally different ballgame, and it was a walk in the park in terms of buying off certain people, and also by getting a no-fly zone via NATO, they were able to wipe out Gaddafi pretty handedly. Now, it's not as easy, and also Benghazi Gate is related to Plan B. Plan B was to, if that failed, they wanted to gin up a chemical weapons or weapons of mass destruction type story in Syria, much in the same way they did with Iraq and Saddam Hussein's mobile anthrax labs, Winnebagos of death, all these sort of comic book scenarios that Colin Powell and people like this brought up. Susan Rice did this in Libya with the Gaddafi issuing Viagra pills to his soldiers to go out and rape Libyans. And obviously there was no uproar at the size of this lie. This is a woman who they put up to be Secretary of State for the United States. But one wonders where they come up with these stories. So but the chemical weapons, there were reports that Gaddafi had aging chemical weapon stocks. And the thing about chemical weapons is they have a sell-by date. Chemical weapons you can't just leave on the shelf and then pull them off in 20 years and they're going to work. There is a sell-by date. So there were reports of aging chemical weapon stocks that fell into the hands of the Libyan so-called rebels during the uprising. Now, where and when a lot of these munitions, including Stinger missiles, not chemical ones, but standard Stinger missiles, fell into the hands of rebels. And those were used as bargaining chips, not just in terms of making money, but the CIA had an operation that some believe was running out of Benghazi to ship some of these Libyan arms over to the Syrian rebels. Okay, now Benghazi Gate was happening right before the Obama re-election bid. And obviously David Petraeus was involved in this. Hillary Clinton was somehow involved in this. And both those two individuals have been stuck and locked in the closet, and most likely will not testify at the Benghazi Gate hearings or any of the pre-hearings so far. So, and Obama mothballed that whole incident until after the election, because they were so afraid in Washington that Benghazi Gate was going to change the course of the election. And Romney only lost by about 6 or 7 points. So Benghazi Gate or anything with regarding David Petraeus or Hillary Clinton would have backfired massively for Obama, and he might have lost the election. Because they were able to sit on it for that period of time, nothing happened. But what it did is it created a fear in Washington, is they don't want anyone prying into this connection between Libya and Syria, because they're going to see the sort of high level of crimes involved here that are comparable to the Iran-Contra scandal, which occurred in the 1980s while Ronald Reagan was president. That's with the Nicaraguan drug gangs, and basically a golden triangle of cocaine and arms and cash between the United States, Nicaragua, and Iran. It was highly embarrassing for the U.S. administration at the time, black mark on history. So Obama didn't want to have one of these, especially in the run-up to his election. So that's a big game changer, okay? So that's Plan B. That was the chemical weapons plan. Now, possibly to let off a few chemical weapons and blame it on President Assad. Well, the alternative media and also the mainstream media, to some extent, has jumped ahead of this story. So there's Plan B in the toilet. Already, they're so desperate on this chemical weapons thing that the New York Times, or the Herald Tribune, one of their subsidiaries, is running stories saying that they're looking back, doing a kind of patting each other on the back, the West and Obama, about how the Israeli satellite imagery of Syria army mixing chemical weapons, like they're having a barbecue outside and they can see this from a satellite. They got this intel and it sprung Obama into action to get Russia and China together to condemn the use of chemical weapons by Assad and to warn him in no uncertain terms that we're not going to accept this sort of behavior. So it's a total this is all Hollywood, basically. So what they're now trying to rewrite history in retrospect, establishing that there is a chemical weapons program or deployment or intention to deploy chemical weapons on the part of Bashar al-Assad. That's how desperate they are. So what they're doing now is they're rewriting history in retrospect because they're preparing the ground for their next move, which is Plan C. And I believe Plan C, which I hope isn't going to happen, but Plan C might be dragging in either Israel or Lebanon into the Syrian conflict in order to call it a regional conflict and therefore justify the intervention of NATO, at least in the northern part of Syria around Aleppo and the northwest of the country. So that's my fear is Plan C. And they've already put Patriot missile batteries into position on the Syrian and Turkish border, which Syria is no military threat whatsoever to Turkey. Turkey has a much larger military, land mass. There's no history of violence between those two countries. But what they're doing is they're basically saying, we're going to put Patriot missile batteries along the border. And we're saying that that's because Syria might attack Turkey, but it's not. It's preparing the border area for a NATO incursion. So flyovers or just slight incursions across the border, possibly to give cover to the rebels. That's what they're doing now, and I can see right through it, and many other pundits are seeing right through these moves. But unfortunately, CNN, the BBC, Fox, ABC, NBC, the Times, they're not seeing it at all. That's the problem that we have in the West.
Right. I've got a lot of questions for you, Patrick, and the detail which you're giving us at the moment is excellent because, of course, none of the mainstream broadcasting in UK is giving us anywhere, well, near the truth, but any detail. But a picture that I just wanted to bring up on screen is Tony Blair. And I think we just need to remind ourselves of what sort of man this is. And I've had this picture sort of stored for some time now, and I occasionally come across it. And it was by chance. I was looking at some other material preparing for today, and this one came up. And it says it all, a grinning Tony Blair shaking the hand of a man who was later to be murdered by the connivance of the British and Americans. Well, French will be in there as well, but...
and he's still walking around scot-free?
He's still walking around scot-free.
Murder and genocide of innocent people, and let alone the troops.
It's incredible, isn't it? And,
yes.
And then we just say, we also remind ourselves that at the moment this man has got the title of peace envoy for the Middle East.
Yeah, he's the king of Jerusalem.
Well...
He's the king, the emperor, sorry, the emperor of Jerusalem.
I wonder what can you actually, or can you tell us anything about the View in Lebanon? What do local people, do they know about Tony Blair? Do they have an opinion?
Not really. I mean, the thing about the difference between the Lebanese discourse and, let's say, the European discourse is that they've got so much issues to deal with on a day-to-day basis in this country, and they have so much corruption that they're trying to sift through in their own country between the multitude of political parties and offshoots and continuously rewriting of the sort of political landscape here, that they just want to be left alone. I think that'll be the overall general feeling. Whereas, in the West, we're able to, they have rolling power cuts here for 3 hours a day. Yesterday it was more than that. It was 3 during the day and 8 at night. So that was 11 hours of the power being cut, and that's on a regular basis. So, this is what you have to deal with here on a daily basis. There is martial law here. There are troops on the streets. They don't have municipal police. They have armed sort of troops doing that job, even traffic cops. So that's the day-to-day life here. So as far as Lord Blair, or the King of Jerusalem, I like to call him, because it's like the latest crusade. You have the Christian king, or the Catholic king, I should say, holding court at the King David suite, or wherever he is in Jerusalem, and running Tony Blair Associates on the side for a tidy profit, and consulting for J.P. Morgan, whose clients are also people trying to get contracts via the UN and the Palestinian Authority. So Tony is playing a central role in that hub. But he's a despicable character, and you have his sort of equivalent now in Downing Street, and you have someone like William Hague, who's now warning that violence is going. Yesterday, this is today actually. William Hague is warning that violence is going to get worse in Syria, and we must step up our response. I don't know what response he's actually talking about, but there are large numbers of British troops doing exercises in Jordan. There are British plans to have a permanent army barracks in Bahrain, which has the green light right now. And there's a lot of technicians who are being stationed from British Armed Forces throughout the Gulf states. So is Britain planning to play a bigger role in the near future in the Middle East? One would think so, based on these various moves. So are there changes afoot in Syria? There are definitely changes afoot in Syria. The only problem is the timeline has been delayed considerably from central planning's point of view in Washington and London. So that's kind of going to change the story a little bit, and who knows what's going to happen in between.
Somebody in the chat, in the columns chat room, has gone rather like the Pope. Blair believes he is second in line to God and is gagging for promotion. So,
He's not. It's not far from the truth.
No.
I mean, here you have a man who, at the age of 50-something, goes to meet the Pope to be baptized and convert himself as a Roman Catholic. And you're wondering why. And then you look at the historical parallel with him holding court in Jerusalem to the Crusades, and it's not far-fetched from where I'm standing to believe that he does have that level of visions of grandeur in terms of how he sees himself within history. But yeah, I mean, you also have the UN envoy, Lakhdar Brahimi from Algeria. He told the BBC today, he said that 40 years of rule by the Assad family in Syria is too long. Now, I might agree with him on that point, but he's not saying that about the Al-Khalifi family in Bahrain, who've been in power, who's the uncle of the king, has been a prime minister since 1971. Okay, so you're not talking about any of those royal families, because obviously they are in the fold of the West. So they don't want to colonize those countries. They do want to colonize Syria. So they want to get rid of what's left of a secular state in that country. That's what this is all about in Syria, is to get rid of one of the last secular nation states. And obviously people in this country would be very afraid as well, because Lebanon is, for all its faults, Lebanon is the only true functioning democracy in the Middle East right now. It's Lebanon. So it's not perfect, but it's done extraordinarily well in a very short space of time to pick up the pieces from what happened when it was being used by superpowers outside of its borders and totally leveled. It's picked up the pieces and done incredibly well to have a functioning democracy. It's not perfect, but it is. And it is largely has a secular spirit in this country. If Syria falls as a secular country, you might not agree with the government in power, but do you want to see a country? Do the rules internationally have to be pure thuggery and funding proxy guerrilla jihad Al-Qaeda armies with foreign fighters funded and armed with Western money and Gulf oil money? Is that what we want to see in the 21st century? Is that the status quo? Is that what we need to look forward to?
Patrick, I can give you an answer to that, because I've got the BBC News politics screen open in front of me, So at 13:07 today, we've got a headline which is Hague options open on military support for Syrian rebels. The UK has not excluded provided military assistance to the Syrian opposition should the conflict worsen, William Hague has said. He told MPs that the UK would look to amend the EU arms embargo, so additional assistance was not closed off. And Labour, of course, has welcomed the government's efforts to support the political transition. So there we are with the cross-party political agenda. There is only one party in Britain today, and that's a corrupt one. But there's a brilliant little headline here. It says, intransigence and brutality. The UK has formally recognised the national coalition of the Syrian revolutionary and opposition forces as the sole legitimate representative of the Syrian people. So William Hague, who presides in one of probably the most corrupt Tory governments we've ever seen in Britain, is now putting himself forward on the world stage to be the man who can say to the Syrian people what sort of government they should have. And you may have missed it, but we pointed out a couple of days ago that even the mainstream press here were reporting that Assad's forces had picked up the number two Al Qaeda man, Mohammed. I've forgotten his surname, but essentially we can now see that Al Qaeda. We could debate whether or not this organisation exists in the form we're told it is, but certainly the government here in Britain and America are telling us that Al Qaeda is a dangerous worldwide terrorist organisation. So they're also now saying it's embedded in the rebel forces within Syria. But here's William Hague now supporting Al Qaeda.
Yeah, Al Qaeda essentially is just a brand. It's a brand that's used. It's used when it favors Western politicians. They use that brand in order to stoke fear within their own populations, fear of threat of terrorism. But that same brand also covers different mercenary groups and mercenary outlets throughout the Middle East and North Africa and Central Asia. So in terms of Al Qaeda in Syria, quite a significant chunk of that is coming directly from Libya. In fact, many of the fighters had fought in the Libyan uprising are now in Syria. Some of them are from Chechnya, some are from Pakistan, there are some from Iraq, from Jordan, from Qatar, from Saudi definitely, and some from perhaps parts of possibly Turkey, but in Algeria, North Africa, you can't rule that out as well. So Egypt. So yeah, that's what it is. It's an amoeba that just breaks up and moves around. But the study that came out before Christmas was that up to 90% of actual foreign armed fighters in Syria were of a foreign nationality. So that's not a civil war. And so this is, again, a misappropriation of language in Syria to call it a civil war. It's not civil, because when you have the majority of the fighters coming from outside the country who are being paid, and it's probably a lot of Saudi Arabian money involved there and Qatari money, being paid $2,000 a month, $3,000 a month to fight. And arms and logistic support is being procured via Whitehall and the Pentagon or the NSA or whoever, CIA. That's not really civil. That's not a civil war. That's a conflict. And it's a proxy war. And that's exactly what it is. We need to call it what it is. If William Hague is calling it a civil war, he's lying. He's misappropriating language.
Well, okay. Patrick, if I could just give, just while you've been speaking there, I just happened to scroll down a little bit more, and I think it's very interesting to read just the sheer propaganda that's coming out of the mouths of not only Mr. Hague, but of course the BBC. They're saying that basically UK has so far provided 7.4 million of what they call non-lethal equipment and support to the Syrian opposition groups. This is going to be boosted to 9.4 million. And so the non-lethal equipment includes solar-powered lighting, generators, communication equipment, and water purification kits. All of those things given to armed forces, of course, allow them to be 10 times more effective, particularly the communications equipment. So, of course, disingenuous at best, but what we're actually seeing. And then Mr. Haig goes on to say that clearly the best outcome for the Syrian people would be a diplomatic breakthrough, bringing an end to the bloodshed and establishing a new Syrian government able to restore stability. However, we must keep open options to help save lives and to assist, this wording is brilliant, and to assist opposition groups opposed to extremism. So William Hague and Mr. Cameron and the Tory government fund the groups who are actively progressing the violence, but while they do it, they say that basically they're only going to help people who are trying to stop the violence. This is political language straight out of 1984, isn't it? Peace becomes war, and war is peace.
Yeah, this is, and look, if anybody's truly concerned in Britain about the welfare of the Syrian people, let me just say, 2 days ago I spoke to a Syrian young man in his early 20s from Aleppo, and he's left the country. Most of his family are out because of what's going on in northern Syria, and he said that he spoke to, I think, his parents recently, and they said that the property is being confiscated by these jihadist rebels, these friends of William Hague, friends of Hillary Clinton. Property is being confiscated, businesses are being stolen. There's a huge black market which has been engineered, and which massive cash profits are being hoarded by these so-called rebel opposition leaders. And so if the government falls in Syria, you're going to see what we saw in Libya, and which was not reported by the BBC very well, which was the death squads that were going around pulling Gaddafi loyalists or anybody who had a green flag at the time, put on their flagpole in their porch, pulling them out, shooting them, raping their daughters, their mothers, killing, beating up, stealing their cars, taking their businesses, telling them to get out of their flats because they no longer own them. That's this kind of vengeance, score-settling, rampant opportunism that you're going to see in Syria when this regime falls. It's absolute chaos. It's going to be bloody, and it's going to be violent more than it is right now. And it's going to be a shame, really, because you'll see a lot of ethnic cleansing, which is going to occur, and that's going to be done under the supervision of the so-called, the higher political international caste, which resides in places like Washington and London. They're going to be shepherding this ethnic cleansing.
Yeah. I'm just going to bring in another couple of points from this BBC report here, because as I've just been able to go through it in a little bit more detail, it's quite interesting to see the political ping pong that's going on, because there's a comment that Shadow Foreign Secretary Douglas Alexander welcomed the government's continued support for a stable political transition, but expressed concerns at the possible arming of rebels. Now, it's good to pick up on that, gentlemen, because we've just shown the hypocrisy of what's been happening in the Labour Party and also within the Lib Dems. But here's this wonderful word, transition, transforming, taking Syria from one state to a new state. That was clearly the agenda in Libya, to get rid of Gaddafi, who was starting to cause trouble, and to get in somebody who would be able to be totally manipulated by UK and American interests. And of course, what have they done in Libya? Well, they've actually put in common purpose to help them rebuild their civil society. So
to help nudge their way forward in the world. Nudging.
Yep, nudging, so applied behavioural psychology in order to get these people out of their present pitiful existence and into the new world vision that, of course, that we're seeing spread through Labour and Conservative and Lib Dem. So we've got Mr. Eric Pickles, who's probably a lot more well-fed than the average person in Lebanon, and he is saying to the country at the moment that common purpose is a waste of space and local authorities shouldn't get involved and use them. We've got common purpose as an organisation basically collapsing financially so that they're having to take loans from their own trustees. So they are world leaders, but they can't manage their own finances. And yet we've got Cameron and Francis Maud, and of course Haig and Patton will be in that mix as well, supporting a common purpose being brought into Libya in order to advise them on how to run the public sector. On one hand, you can laugh at this, but or say it's hypocrisy. But on the other hand, these people, and I think this is becoming more and more clear, they believe their own reality. William Hague believes he is now, well, maybe he's an apprentice to the King of Jerusalem, as you've called Tony Blair. And these people actually believe that they are transforming societies to take them into a better state. Do they not see the destruction and the absolute collapse of the societies as they do it? It appears not.
Well, one of the things they look at common purpose in Libya. Now, if you're in the top echelon of common purpose and you're looking at that development, that's basically the same as when Dick Cheney's looking at a contract in Iraq. That's a contract in Libya to provide leadership training, and who knows how many more addendums to that contract you can achieve in sort of 5 to 10 years. It's just a little market that's been colonized and will bring in some cash, and that cash is usually coming from places like deep pockets coffers like the UN or the budget, foreign aid budget in Britain, which has been shown to be a complete sham in the last week, I might add. It's a money thing. The United Kingdom doesn't produce any products anymore outside of the defense industry for export, nothing to speak of. So they're exporting their intelligence, their social engineering capabilities are being exported, their privatization expertise is being exported to third world countries that have been devastated by the hand of those very same countries coming in to recolonize it. So that's exactly what we're seeing. We've seen in Libya, that we're looking at the beginnings of that in Syria, and if they have their wicked way, they'll move on to Iran in 2 to 3 years.
Right, well, I'm just going to ask Mike if he can bring this one up on screen. I'm sorry. I've got to go on to, just a second. Wait a minute, I'll just need a minute to do this.
How long are you over there for, Patrick?
I don't know, maybe a few weeks, but I'm going to go to visit Jordan in the next couple of weeks as well, and hopefully make a few other stops. So just trying to be as productive as possible in this trip. So we'll see. I tend to play things by ear.
Yeah. And how many times did you go to Libya whilst Gaddafi was in power? Did you visit Libya before?
No, I've never been to Libya.
You haven't done Libya yet, okay.
No, never been to Libya.
You've got your slides ready, haven't you?
Well, I've just got this one. It's interesting because I'm following through the topics that you're bringing up here. But when people are really asking themselves, what is going on in an international scene, and what is Britain doing, what's America doing? This organisation we mentioned a couple of days ago, it's called CSC Leaders, and it's talking about not only creating global leaders, selecting, educating, training special people to be global leaders. CSC Leaders is saying that it's particularly targeting the Commonwealth. So this is one of the pages from their website. It's giving you facts on the Commonwealth, but the main thing is it's boasting that the Commonwealth provides a network of 54 countries spanning 6 continents. It's home to 2.2 billion people, a third of the world's population. And here is this organisation that is saying we are going to select special people who are going to be active within their own countries within the Commonwealth in order to start this and I've got to use the term common purpose, because if we say who is CSC leaders, it's being pushed by the political charity Common Purpose and the Duke of Edinburgh. And what are they talking about? They're talking about transforming countries. They're talking about bringing nation states together. What we think we're looking at here is using the Commonwealth network in order to move towards one world system of government. And it's quite interesting, the little map that we've got. Okay, in earlier times that would have been a map of the British Empire, but what we're now seeing is the power of the Commonwealth. And of course, if we just about make it out to the eastern end of the Mediterranean there, we're seeing what's being nominated as Commonwealth interests. So I'm not sure if you're aware of this organisation. Patrick?
No, I haven't, but it fits right into neatly into slot next to all the rest of them. So there seems to be this big focus in the West on leadership training and training our next leaders and so forth. And again, what a lot of these organizations do, when you see them, when they're of the globalist nature, they're not so much training future leaders as they're trying to identify actual leaders and being able to route them out of politics, route them out of the organization from within. And so they achieve that purpose as much as anything, which is trying to scare people, genuinely good, potentially dynamic, flamboyant, visionary people out of organizations. Certainly that's what one of the things the Common Purpose states in its courses, in order to identify and agitate and to push people out who could be a future visionary leader.
Well, the other thing people can check for themselves is that if they go and have a look at this website and then start to look at who is actually doing the selecting, and what you quickly come to is that we're dealing with very powerful people, certainly linked to the international globalist scene, so they're dealing with very big companies, or they are also involved with the major banks. So we're seeing the same old names come up of Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Rothschild, Bank of England. So wherever we start to push through this sort of smokescreen over the political front, and we're starting to say, well, who is actually putting up the power and the visionary effort to go for the politics, we're not looking at traditional politicians or a traditional political agenda. We're always coming back on this international money power base. And I suppose that actually it makes complete sense, because you've said earlier on at the beginning of your report that basically oil prices and profits that could be made on oil were a key part of the decision-making process about what was going to happen in Syria.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a complicated discussion with regards to what would happen to Syria should regime change be successful. I'm talking about the West's regime change, which is to pull Bashar al-Assad out of power and replace him with someone from the Ministry of Petroleum or something who's educated in the West. Assad was educated in the West, as it goes as well. But the bigger thing is it's a battle of visions. The Emir of Qatar wants to run a pipeline from Qatar to the Mediterranean to cut into Russia's seemingly unbreakable monopoly of gas to Europe. So hence, this is why Russia has taken a keen interest in Syria from the beginning, because it will affect, if this pipeline goes through, it will affect their gas market. And of course, as we know, on the smaller geopolitical scale, gas has more leverage in political power than does oil, as has been proven between Russia and Ukraine, for instance. And there's many other examples of that, because you can get oil from all over the globe. If one supply is shut down over here, you can get it from over there, but you can't do that necessarily with gas. So it's a different story there. So that's that's definitely a big thing. But we've done Andrew McKillop did a feasibility report, which I published on 21st Century Wire a couple of months ago, showing that the pipeline from Qatar to the Mediterranean, the gas pipeline proposed, is going to be a pink elephant. It doesn't make any economic sense, and it's not actually going to work within the parameters of the European market. So again, another half-baked idea could be. It wouldn't be the first time that a half-baked idea would be one of the pivotal reasons for some sort of a military escapade in the region. But it's also a battle of visions, okay? When Mahmoud Ahmadinejad comes and says that there's going to be a new Middle East, he's talking about a vision, which is a Tehran-centric vision of the Middle East or the region, okay? Right now, the two superpowers in the region are Iran and Saudi Arabia. Now, Iran has come down a notch because of sanctions, so they're no longer a superpower in the region. Now, Saudi Arabia will be the dominant superpower in the region. And then Israel isn't a superpower. Israel is a military power, but Israel exists on subsidies from the United States. Okay, so they're still connected to the U.S. in that they've got an umbilical cord to Washington, so they're not a true superpower in the region. Okay, so a reforming look. So now you have the new Middle East. In turn, what Ahmadinejad is talking about is basically the BRICS countries, which basically India, Iran, and Russia, China. That sort of trading mechanism, competing against or actually trading with the Gulf states, and Israel being no longer being a military threat, or no longer being the dominant military power in the region. Now, a lot of Israelis have something to say about that, but if you look at what Israel is and what it has been since the Second World War, it's been a wedge that's been driven by the West right into the Middle East region, and it's created a permanent arc of conflict over the last almost 70 years now. So that's something that a lot of people believe is not in the best interests of the region as a whole or the globe. But there is a small lobby, a very small lobby, who believes that it is. And that has been the dominant voice and has been the dominant lobby since Israel came on the scene in 1948. That smaller voice of small minority that has to do with people who want to stoke up permanent conflict. And as we said in the beginning of the show, the biggest beneficiaries of this have been the arms manufacturers. A peaceful Middle East is no good for the arms industry, I'll tell you right now. They'll lose a lot of money. The share prices would go down dramatically. These are the biggest buyers of hardware and systems right now on the planet. It's a big growth area. So in the petroleum industry as well. So look, that's the kind of situation we're looking at. It has to change at some point in the future. How it changes and who are the beneficiaries of that change is right now what's being jockeying for position. They're jockeying for position right now on that chessboard.
Yeah.
Just while you on the subject of arms, Patrick, there's been uproar in this country, America, over the old Piers Morgan, Alex Jones interview.
Yeah.
We do have a video in a moment to play. Are we going to play it now, Mike?
Well, I think we can do, actually.
Yeah.
But just to say, Patrick, have you got anything you'd like to just summarise or finish on with regard to how you see the situation developing then in mainly in Syria, of course, but
I'm going to hopefully give you guys another report next week, because I'm going to be talking to more people and interviewing a few people, actually, hopefully over the next 10 days. But, it's a shame if it does come to blows, because this particular country is a fantastic country that is just getting back on its feet. And the last thing it needs is to be dragged into a sub-regional conflict, and especially one that's being engineered from outside of the borders of this region. That really sad development if it comes to that. And I'm very scared because with regards to Syria, there'll be more refugees coming from that country, and there will be more sectarian conflict as this conflict kind of steams along.
Right. So if we do our bit to help the right situation develop, it seems to me that we should be doing everything we can to get over to people what the true situation is in the Middle East. And you've given us a fantastic amount of detail. And of course, sorry, go ahead.
I'll just end quickly. The Syrian, I spoke to a couple of different Syrian people from different economic brackets as well. And the one thing I heard, which has been the same from each of them, is yes, we know that the Assad government needs to transition out. They said, but we don't believe it's something that Europe and America should be doing for us, and especially in the way that they're doing it now is quite violent and quite destructive. They know that change is inevitable, but they don't want it to change this way. And these, Syrian people aren't stupid. Damascus is the oldest inhabited city in the planet since pre-antiquity. So these people have been around a lot longer and civilization-wise than we have in Europe. So I think they would know a thing or two about their own destiny.
Okay. Well, we just lost the last little bit there. Okay. Thanks very much for that. Well, I think we're going to move on to the subject of guns in America, because having commented on it, we've had quite a lot of interest from viewers and listeners, and we believe this is a subject which isn't going to be properly debated in UK. The propaganda machine is turning, but we'd like to start off with a little video clip here.
Is this the one with Pratt, is it?
Mr. Pratt.
Pratt.
Yeah, well, following on from Piers Morgan's interview with Alex Jones day before yesterday, I suppose it was, he had this guy, Mr. Pratt, he's the director of the Gun Owners of America, and Mr. Pratt took a very different approach to Piers Morgan, and it seems that perhaps Piers Morgan isn't quite the cool head that he was pretending to be with Alex Jones.
From what I saw, he was downright rude.
So, well,
Piers
I've just taken a little excerpt from this. It's about 4 minutes, so we'll watch that and then we can talk about it.
Okay.
And Patrick will say, we hope you can stay with us for the last 30 minutes, because obviously you've got knowledge on the States as well. And we think this is a subject which wants properly airing and discussing, as I think it's going to become bigger. Okay, we'll see what the little video has to show us.
Oh, I think you have sufficient firepower, Mr. Pratt, because of course you have 300 million guns in circulation. That is why, and I want to read these statistics to you carefully, because I heard you this morning talking to Alex Jones, who I had on early in the week, and we'll play some more from him a bit later. And you were talking about these figures from Britain and how apparently the gun control in Britain has been a fiasco and crime has been through the roof, etc., etc. So I actually dug out the official figures. These are the homicide figures from guns in England and Wales by comparison to the United States of America going back to 2003. I'm going to read these quickly to you because I think they make a point on their own. 2003, gun murders in England and Wales, 68. In America, 11,920. In 2004, 73, England and Wales. In America, 11,624. In 2005, 50. In England and Wales, in America 12,352, and so it goes on about the same levels in both countries.
Now,
let me finish. Here's my point. Every time I hear you say that there is a safer country where you have more guns, my brain takes me back to these figures, because in Britain we brought in as you know, a handgun and assault weapon ban after what happened at Dunblane, where a very similar number of school children were murdered with guns. This is the result of what happens when you take a responsible action to respond to a massacre beyond any kind of comprehension. Why do you still persist in trying to persuade Americans that the complete opposite is true?
Well, first of all, according to your investigateur of the constabulary, the data that you're using for the murder rate in England is a sham. There's a monumental misreporting of what constitutes murder. If 3 people are murdered, it's likely to be counted as one event.
What an absolute lie. That is
Well,
an absolute...
that's what you say
see,
when
Mr.
you
Pratt,
don't know what you're
no,
talking
Mr. Pratt,
about. But
let me
I
tell
was
you,
just
it
looking
doesn't
at
take
that from
very
the
long.
2000
Mr.
report.
Pratt, it doesn't take very long to count 50 gun murders.
These are your own
How long
government's
do you think
data.
it takes
Go tell the
police
constabulary
or a
of Britain
pathologist
that they're
to count
lying.
50
You
bodies
ask
a year?
them for an apology. Why don't you?
So you are telling me that 50 murders a year, 59, these are simply invented statistics. And in fact, the figures in Britain for gun murders are many more times that, yeah? That's what you're
That's
saying.
exactly what your own constabulary is saying. Actually, I don't know that you included in your litany the Cumbria murders that occurred well after the gun ban, in which 12 people were murdered.
Let's
I admit I
multiply
had to look
this.
up where Cumbria is, but it happens to be on the west coast of England.
Yeah, don't be patronising. 50 murders in 2005, 41 in 2009, 39 in 2011.
No, you had 970. I don't know what you're talking about.
This is complete nonsense, Mr. Pratt.
You're from another planet, Mr. Morgan.
So you are stating,
and that's why you're having
Mr.
trouble
Pratt,
living
you are
in America.
stating, you are telling me on CNN that we had how many gun murders last year?
970, and you have a violent crime rate that is the 4th highest of any country
Mr.
in
Pratt,
the world.
you have just propagated an absolute lie.
Well, then go tell the editors.
2011, there were 39 gun murders in England and Wales.
Go tell the editors of The Telegraph, who published just that information 2 days after our last interview.
Mr. Pratt, there were 39 gun murders in England and Wales in 2011. It's
You're
a fact.
whistling past the graveyard.
No, what you're doing is deliberately lying, deliberately twisting it, so that Americans watching this, who may be tempted to buy in to your ludicrous fear game, rush out tomorrow and buy more weapons and more ammunition. Because you know what? More guns, less gun crime, less gun murders. It is a fallacy. It is based on lies. You've just propagated another lie. You've just said that a figure of 39, the official figures from the British Home Office, 39 gun murders in 2011 in England and Wales. You have added a naught to that and then trebled it. It's outrageous.
I'm sure you're
What you
going to
do
feel
is
so much
outrageous.
better. You'll feel so much better being defenseless until you need a gun. And then it'll be a little too late to buy your insurance policy.
Let's take a break, Mr. Pratt. Let's come back and talk more about this. Try and stick, if you can, to facts and not lies. That would be very helpful for the tenor of this debate.
Right, so first of all, just to clarify a few things, Mr. Pratt actually was quite wrong in his figures. I don't know whether Piers Morgan is correct, wholly correct, but Pratt was certainly quite wrong. He was right to say that the Telegraph covered some. I'll just put it.
Well, I think you have sufficient.
Sorry, he was right to say that the Telegraph did highlight the fact that gun crime statistics are wrong in this country, and it's by dint of the way that the crimes are recorded. But he was wrong to say that there were 970 deaths as a result of gun crime in this country in 2011. That was incorrect. Nonetheless, he also highlighted that Britain was one of the suffered one of the highest violent crime rates in the world, and I think you have a slide with the Daily Mail somewhere there, where they.
Yes, there. If you want to bring it up. Yeah.
So that's a table from 2009 where they're showing that actually the United Kingdom has the highest violent crime rate in the world. So 2034 violent crimes per 100,000 residents, and I think in the article itself they mentioned that the United States has something like 600 violent crimes per 100,000. So this is clearly a much bigger issue than Piers Morgan would like people to think about. He is narrowing the statistics down to some very narrow figures. He's not mentioning the circumstances under which gun crime happens in the United States, that by far the majority of gun crime happens in the United States in cities of populations of over 250,000 people. The United States has many more cities of that scale as a proportion of their population than, say, Britain has, for example. So, you know, it's a much bigger issue, much broader issue than Piers Morgan is presenting in his propaganda, and it is propaganda.
Well, I was going to say, perhaps we should set the scene for people that are coming into this debate raw, as it were. But what is happening now, of course, after the latest atrocity, Sandy Hook, in the States, is that we're seeing major calls by Obama and many other people in the political domain in the States to outlaw guns. And of course, this brings them into direct conflict with the National Rifle Association and other gun owners in America who are adamant that they have an absolute right under the American Constitution to bear arms.
Second Amendment.
Second Amendment,
Yeah.
Particularly to bear arms for their own protection. And I think there are something like 63 million gun owners in the States. People can correct me on the exact figure, but we're talking a very high number. And I believe in the interview with Piers Morgan at one stage, they were saying that there was something like 300 million guns in the States. So, Mike.
Yeah, but it should be remembered that only 3% of those, or 3% of the guns that are used in violent crime are assault rifles. So 97% of the guns used in violent crime are handguns or other form of weapon. And yet the main focus of this diatribe from Morgan and from other people in the American establishment is assault rifles. So it can't be, the reason behind the campaign cannot be to reduce the number of people killed and injured with guns. There's
because
some
they're
other
going
reason
for the
it,
wrong
because
sort of weapons.
They're going for a weapon which only causes 3% of the violent crime in the United States.
Can I just make a comment that somebody in the columns chat rooms has said, we don't really do gun murders, we prefer murder in police custody. That's someone in the columns chat room.
It's a very astute comment,
Yeah.
because one of the background issues, of course, that is not being discussed in America, and it's certainly not being discussed in Britain, and certainly Piers Morgan is not discussing it, is why so many American gun owners are becoming so nervous at the thought of giving up their guns. And of course, the reason that they are becoming incredibly nervous is the fact that they see an increasingly dictatorial and police state America emerging with the assistance of the Obama regime. And something that is absolutely not reported in mainstream British press, and of course Piers Morgan and his colleagues are part of this propaganda machine that we're suffering in UK, is we are simply not being told that America has now got to the state where US troops are being regularly deployed on American streets. That includes ordinary soldiers, it includes US Marines. They're not only patrolling with weapons, but they're also patrolling with armed vehicles. This is a shot of Alex Jones's website InfoWars, which we'd encourage people to go and read the information for themselves. But the little image in the centre, you might see it as a few men. They are actually soldiers walking along a very suburban street. There's armoured vehicles with them as well. This is a patrol that actually took part in Crookston, Minnesota, where all of a sudden local people wake up to find American military patrolling the streets. And when they've asked the military what they're doing on the streets, of course the average soldiers can't tell them because they don't know. But this has now expanded to other parts of America where armed soldiers are now checking people's identity. They're pulling over drivers in cars and checking their driving permits. And it's put forward as a quasi-anti-terrorism act, but of course under the American Constitution it's unlawful to be using troops in this way.
I would just remind everybody that it's only a year, 18 months since there was a very similar exercise happened in a village in South Devon, unannounced. It appeared in the media afterwards about armed British military on the streets of a British village doing exactly that kind of thing, a so-called exercise, checking people's driving licenses and other things.
Yeah. So we come to this basic thing that American gun owners are very nervous about giving up their guns because they're becoming increasingly worried about the direction in which Obama's government is going. More and more draconian rules from government about what people can and can't do. We know that through the free media in America, many people, we are talking millions of people, are now starting to say should they be more frightened of their own government than so-called terrorist organisations like Al-Qaeda. And so gun owners don't want to give up their guns, but of course every time we see a mass shooting, and of course that's not even limited to America, which has the guns, because of course we've suffered them in Britain as well, where we haven't got guns. The criminals have got plenty of guns in Britain, but not ordinary decent people. So this is what the debate is really about. Patrick, you've experience of living in America. What's your view?
You kind of hit the nail on the head in the tail end of your commentary there, Brian, that it's about having what's called a monopoly of force. And that's really what this is about. You know, if you do ban guns in a country, look, living in the UK, you don't know who's got what. If you're living in a place like South London, where I've lived for many years, but it's a monopoly of force. Cities is a different ball game, and again, we can't compare Britain to America. There's a very different culture and a very different history, just like we can't compare South Africa to the United States either, because the correlation in South Africa with gun crime and gun ownership, both of those statistics are very high. Okay, so and gun ownership in Israel is very high, but gun crime between Israelis is not very high. So again, it's apples and oranges. But again, it comes back to, with regards to the United States, it's a monopoly of force. And what would happen if you do regulate firearms? It's almost certain that see, this is going to go in a two-step process. The first step is, and if I had access to Eric Holder's master plan, he's Obama's Attorney General. He's also one of the architects of Operation Fast and Furious, which I did an in-depth report on for InfoWars for Alex Jones down on the Arizona-Mexican border. And what I discovered during that investigation was that it seemed to me, and it seemed to many others as well, that the federal government was basically flooding the black market by sending their straw purchasers into gun dealers in border states, particularly Texas and Arizona, that have the most, let's say, liberal gun laws. They would send their straw purchasers in. In some cases, they had criminal records. They were flagged up, and the FBI would tell the gun store owner to sell them the firearms anyway, because they said they needed to track these firearms. Of course, there was no tracking involved at all. What they were doing, the U.S. federal government, Obama's government, was flooding the black market with firearms and increasing violent crime along the border states. And of course, these firearms, many of them were semi-automatic weapons, were falling into the hands of the Mexican drug cartels and their related tertiary gangs connected with those cartels along the border. And people were killed, including a U.S. Border Patrol agent, Brian Terry. And of course, that inquiry really got the public interested in Fast and Furious to begin with, because he was killed around, I believe, 2010. So, and there was many other violent instances where people were killed. Ranchers were killed by drug-related gangs. With some of these, and the firearms were tracked back to Operation Fast and Furious. So this is what the U.S. federal government is doing in its spare time. And so Eric Holder said, and it's the neoliberal, or it's the sort of liberal agenda, as it were, has always been to ban firearms in the United States. And those people, if you look at the globalist plan for regions like North America, they will require a monopoly of force if they need to execute Agenda 21, for instance, which is a UN program to move people off of the land and into super cities. Now, this might happen in 10 or 20 or 30 years, but at some point down the line in these decades, the firearms need to be taken away from people so that there is a monopoly of force by the state, so the state can take them off their land and claim eminent domain on their farm or whatever, and take them off, move them into the city. But the first stage in the disarmament process in America will probably be, and they'll do a few trial balloon tests, I predict, very soon, which will be gun buyback programs. And what will happen is that maybe a semi-auto or an auto will get $1,000 or even maybe up to $2,000 per firearm if they bring them in on the buyback program. So basically, people will, in the short term, be buying up firearms, semi-automatic weapons, for hundreds of dollars, selling them back to the government for $2,000, and this process will continue for a period of time. So it's basically be a massive moneymaker in the short term for the gun manufacturers. And it will also be, there's also a big problem traditionally in law enforcement in America with large amounts of narcotics and firearms somehow vanishing out the back door and back into the hands of criminals. I don't know how this happens, but it just seems to happen all the time throughout history. Maybe there's a bit of corruption, who knows, within government and some parts of law enforcement, but that's inevitable. So, and again, what it's going to do, anytime the government gets involved in any of these sort of operations, it does create new hydras in terms of the criminal enterprises and the black markets.
Yeah, but we're clearly seeing a desperation of the American government to try and get arms off ordinary people. And of course, if you do the simple analysis on it with 63, if that figure is correct, 63 million weapons in the hands of ordinary people, that doesn't, that's not guns amongst gangs or criminals, but of people who are entitled to own those weapons. That represents a force, which means that the American government cannot simply dictate policies to the American public. This is the issue that's coming in.
Well, I mean, look, the really dangerous part of this is if you look at, let's compare this gun ownership debate and the gun violence crisis, or artificial crisis, some might call it, in the United States. Let's look at this in an international scale. Let's compare this to the war on terror, okay? Now, the big danger with regards to governments, and the U.S. federal government has created a festering crime environment with Fast and Furious. People got killed, and then they would ride in on their white horse with the solution. This is called the Hegelian dialectic. So they did this with, let's say, a lot of people can look at events like 9/11 and 7/7, and there's definitely fingerprints of security services somewhere in there that they were somehow involved in that operation that helped to bring forward the global war on terror. So it's a Hegelian equation. So government, how dangerous can government or the state be, that how desperate to get its agenda forward that it might even play a part in some of the violent acts used for the battle cry to ban guns. And that's something that is a big possibility. If you look at some of the Sandy Hook incident, I mean, I'm not going to get into the conspiracy theory realm, but there were earlier news reports on the day of a second shooter, and I did not hear any of that repeated in the mainstream media, and that to me is a big red flag. So that's just one part of this conversation. But how desperate would politicians or the globalists be to get their way with policy? Would they be desperate enough to possibly be involved in violent crime in order to get their public opinion on their side? I don't know. It's definitely up for discussion.
Well, Patrick, I'm not squeamish on this topic at all, and my view is that the average American citizen would be extremely foolish to give up their guns because they're faced with a malevolent government in exactly the same way that we are here in Britain. But isn't it fascinating that in Britain, as guns have been steadily taken away from people over the years, well, we have got some licensed gun owners within gun clubs or farmers with their shotguns, a relatively small number of people all licensed. The rest of the British public, of course, do not own guns. So we've become an increasingly gun-free society. I'm going to qualify that remark in a minute. But at the same time, we've seen Britain's police steadily and increasingly armed with ever more sophisticated weapons. And there was a report about a year ago of Britain's police taking or putting in an order for some 60,000 automatic weapons. And I think the average member of the British public should be saying to themselves, if we don't have these guns, why do the police need automatic weapons? And then we can take it a step further, of course, and say, well, the law-abiding members of the public don't have guns. Who owns the guns and the dangerous? Well, they're all dangerous in their way, but we'll say especially lethal weapons such as handguns. Who owns those handguns? Well, of course, they're owned by criminals who are not going to bother registering them in the first place.
Correct.
So we can see by what's going on in the UK, and with an eye on the clock, because we've got a few other things we'd just like to cover, it's unbelievable, isn't it, to see somebody as arrogant and pompous as Piers Morgan, who 1 minute is an expert on people performing on stage, is now being thrust forward to advise the American public on not only how they should defend themselves, but what the constitution of their country should be. And the minimum we can say from the interview with Mr. Pratt, which we've just seen the clip, is that the sheer arrogance of Piers Morgan is breathtaking. I don't think he's just in America for a bit of a holiday and to make some money from CNN. I think he is there absolutely to help stir up trouble in America. And personally, I fully support Alex Jones's campaign as he started a petition to get Piers Morgan removed from America.
Okay, but we don't want him back.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say, is we're going to support Alex Jones in getting Piers Morgan out of Britain, but for goodness sake, don't bring him back here. Perhaps we could send him somewhere else.
Yeah, well, maybe the UK column can run a campaign to try to find a third-party country that will take Piers Morgan.
Okay.
Genius.
Could we do it as a sort of discount package? You could get Piers Morgan and Tony Blair as a sort of, you know...
The only place Tony Blair should be is at The Hague. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, the thing which we won't leave this subject without just saying, as you have just mentioned, we're not going to get into any form of theory about Sandy Hook. I think there's more information coming out all the time which is going to raise questions. But what we do know is there is amazing correlation between these suicide massacres that we're seeing both in Britain and America and indeed other countries, and the use of psychotropic drugs.
It's interesting actually in TNS, just sorry to butt in, but in the TNS chat box, someone made quite a good point. They think Piers Morgan has as much right to talk about these matters as Barack Hussein Obama.
Well, there we go.
Isn't properly Americanite Obama either, is he? So.
Okay, well, I've just got a couple of little clips here which we'll flick through, but just to say to people, if you haven't heard some of this stuff before or you want to know what this gun debate is really about in America, these are just some little film clips where media stations in America were getting curious as to why they were starting to see American Army forces on the streets. Here's a picture of a guy in some form of armoured vehicle. So it's not just, this is not just hearsay. The video is there of these people operating on the streets and what's it all about. Okay, I'm just going to jump forward and then we've got a few comments to make on some of the people who've come in with questions. But we wanted to just mention this topic, which is the Telegraph here reporting the private firms would operate state schools for profit. And we've got Michael Gove here, seems to be taking some advice from school children, which I recommend he does, because I'm sure it'd be better than David Cameron. But it's very interesting. The Telegraph is selling this as if it's a new idea, when of course we know that Labour has been pushing through the rise of corporate interests in education via the academy schools, and in particular via an organisation called ARC. So this seems to be another propaganda exercise. Let's drift it through, but the ultimate aim is to get unaccountable private companies in charge of education. In the text here in the Telegraph, it was very interesting. It suddenly mentioned an organisation I'd never heard of before called Bright Blue, and this is a modernising pressure group regarded as David Cameron's natural ally. And so we suddenly see the Telegraph giving great prominence to Bright Blue. The Telegraph has never given prominence to UK Column, which, well, maybe we're glad about. But here's Bright Blue. It appears out of nowhere, so we thought we'd have a look at it. So here's part of the website. It's discussing and campaigning for progressive politics. It's a very clean, smooth website. It's obviously taken a lot of professional effort to put together. Then they start telling us about themselves. And this is the key bit, which we'll highlight for you. Bright Blue is an independent, not-for-profit organisation bringing together people from across the political spectrum. And they've got their agenda of what they're going to do. Bit of noise from you there in the background, Patrick, sorry. If we actually look at who is supporting them, we come straight into this organisation, the Joseph Rowntree Reform Trust Limited. And if you dig into that, of course, you can start to come back into other areas of politics that are being manipulated behind the scenes. So here we've got the Media Standards Trust, which drove the whole of the attack on the press in UK. And in their funders, of course, here's Joseph Rowntree again. We've also got Cohen Foundation. We've got Pearson very active behind the scenes with both Labour and the Conservatives. So this is an absolute lie. The whole article is a lie. This is not an independent think tank. This is a funded think tank. And of course, it's the think tanks that are pushing the agendas through. So would you trust a private company, particularly part of the worldwide industrial military complex, to be running a school that's taking in children from the age of 3 to 18? Well, I certainly wouldn't. And we'll reinforce that because this is part of a UK Column article in May 2009 where we were pointing out the dangers of the academy school system. And part of the reason we were so interested was the organisation ARC, A-R-K. One of its linked organisation was called Execution Limited, which sounds a little bit dodgy. But we were particularly interested where they started talking about the teaching of eugenics and selective breeding and a project Caressing, which was going to introduce children to the touch of adults. And of course, this whole programme, here they are again, is supported by Goldman Sachs, EIM, International Asset Management, SG Warburg, Citicorp, and Deutsche Morgan Grenfell. So this is not about private companies running schools, it's to do with the banks. And let's look at the people. Just wanted to give this lovely lady a mention again, Harriet Harman and Patricia Hewitt and Liberty, because they were both, Liberty was working with Paedophile Information Exchange and Paedophile Action for Liberty. And if we go through a little bit deeper, we're finding that Laura Huxley, wife of Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, started the charity Children Our Ultimate Investment, and that operates teens and toddlers, and that brings us back to Project Caressing. So we think something very nasty is being planned for the education of our children, and all the parties are involved. And we just bring to your attention Mr. Ed Balls, of course, former Secretary of State, Department for Children, Schools and Families, and Bilderberger. So he's working with an organisation with its roots in the Nazi Party, and you won't be able to read the letter, but what the letter is admitting, he was using public money to pay for his transport to that delightful organisation. So we've covered a lot of subjects today. We hope we've got you thinking. What is coming, unless we stop it, is a dictatorship.
We didn't cover half the subjects we wanted to.
I know. but we'll come on to
But
those.
we will do them, yes.
And we've got a few comments from people.
Some nice comments, it's all good.
Some people are getting a little bit
Yes,
upset
about
that
the paper.
we're not replying to emails, and we're going to see what we can do on this, but it's capacity. We simply have not got the capacity to reply to all emails.
We are trying to get the paper. We no, it's in the process, isn't it?
The paper is coming out, but we've taken a decision that we're focusing on this media as the most rapid way of getting information across. But a paper is coming, so please be patient. And we'd like to thank everybody for their support.
Yeah, especially TNS.
TNS Radio
Yep.
and other people retransmitting.
Can I just say, Patrick's going to be on with James and I tomorrow on Liberty Tactics, along with Thomas Sheridan, author.
Excellent. So, Patrick, thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for viewing with us and listening today, UK Column Live. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.